You're listening to the Raccoon Roundtable podcast, episode number 59. I'm your host, David Oria, and I'm here with my co-host.
Kristine, and our guest today is Kristine Hernandez. Kristine is a preschool special education teacher, and she actually tells us exactly why she loves being a teacher. She also shares the challenges that she faced pre-COVID, during COVID, and now kind of the endemic and trying to get back in the classroom, which is so complex. She also talks about or gives advice for those who maybe want to be a teacher and what kind of characteristics and skills it might have, like obviously loving children. But I mean, she just provides so much information, really, really good information. And you could tell how passionate she is for her kids and for just teaching in general. What do you think, David?
Dude, it's totally. Despite like all the challenges that you mentioned, man, like the passion, you could just hear it.
Yeah.
And hope you guys enjoy this one. Honestly, this is just super happy to have you here on this platform, especially like during a time right now, like I mean for those of you listening, maybe like in the future, we're currently at the end of summer of 2022, and I think having our guest today is like just it's just so timely, honestly, just because we're gearing back for back to school. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things, or at least everybody is right now thinking about. Even it's kind of trickled down into even, my profession, preparing kids for that. So having you here on the podcast is awesome. If you could help us kind of just like set the table, just introduce yourself to our audience, and then give us a little background about like what you do, where you're at, and yeah, kind of how life is right now for you in this kind of stage in this season of 2022.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I am Kristine Hernandez. I am a preschool special education teacher in Skokie, Illinois, which is not too far from Chicago. I am entering my 10th year of teaching, which is wild to me. I still consider myself a newbie, but apparently I am way past that phase and can no longer use that excuse. I have a bachelor's of science in early childhood education, along with a master's in special education. Let's see, where do I begin?
I guess I would say, could you begin with like, is this one thing you always wanted to do? Or did you always want to be a teacher?
I'm gonna say yes. I knew I always wanted to do something with kids, even as a kid. Like, I remember my grandmother babysitting kids, and I would just be right in there with her,
Nice.
wanting to help out. And then one day, like I remember my third grade teacher telling my mom, you have a very chatty daughter. It's like she wants to take over the classroom. And I was very fortunate enough when I started teaching to be able to go back to my elementary school and tell that teacher, like, well, I've become a teacher.
Oh, that's what's up.
And I shared that comment with her, and she just thought it was so funny that, things have come full circle in that sense. So,
No, that's awesome.
Yeah,
What's crazy though, like, so kind of back to add context to the story, right? So, Kristine and I go way back, right? And like, we actually went to the same, middle school and elementary school and middle school, and went to the same high school. And so my homeroom actually in high school was connected, or the teacher that ran our homeroom,
yeah.
she ran like the early childhood, or like the preschool kind of thing at our high school. And like every day at homeroom, I would see Kristine there. And like, so when you say it's just kind of like been inside you, like even from an early age, like that definitely translates through like your whole story, at least since I've known you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's always just been within me to work with kids. I kind of told myself, like, okay, if teaching doesn't pan out, I want to do like pediatric nursing or something with kids. And it just so happened that like teaching did work out. And I was able to do it. So, and I am doing it.
I guess, I mean, you described that you grew up enjoying like spending time with kids. I mean, what other characteristics would you say would somebody have if they're thinking about what career to pursue? I mean, okay, I guess you should like kids if you're planning to become a teacher. But what other characteristics do you say are skills that people should have?
Skills. I'm sorry, it froze for a little bit. So I just want to reiterate the question that I make sure that I heard it correctly. What
Uh-huh.
skills should people possess in order, like if they're considering a career in teaching?
Yeah, or another characteristics. Like I know that you should probably like kids, but like what else would you say? I mean, would you say that you saw in yourself that you knew that instead of like pediatrician or any other route, was teaching was right for
Yeah,
you?
I think for myself, personally, I enjoy the learning process. And I always think back, like someone once told me, like the best way to know if someone has learned something is if they can teach someone else.
Mm.
And so I always think back to that whenever I'm teaching my kids. And so I think back, like, okay, if I taught them a lesson on the letter A, can they now tell their parent about it and things about it? Like that, it starts at the top and they make a line down and things like that. It, it makes an ass sound or it has two sounds. So and when I think about that, I just think, okay, if they can do that, then that was something that I just kind of loved. So that learning process, and then helping others to teach others, I guess, in
Mm.
a sense too, because like it's been really neat to not just like being in this now 10 years. I haven't just had like 3, 4, and 5-year-olds as students. I've had like college kids come into my classroom now and observe me and teach and show them my way of teaching, and help them kind of perfect their craft so that when they go into their classroom, they kind of develop a sense of their own style. So I would say definitely that learning process was one of the things that I know about myself. I think if others are looking within themselves, it's probably patience. Patience. I get that a lot. Especially when people find out like I'm a special education teacher, they go, "Oh, you must be really patient." And I go, "I mean, I think I am," and that's the best way I know how to answer that. Is like I think I am. But I think I truly do believe like I'm very patient in all aspects where things don't. If people are quick to jump to an emotion, I kind of take a step back and I'm just like, okay, well, how can we let this play out before reacting for myself? And so I think, that's probably one of the things that I look into as well as the patience that is needed to just teach and then reteach and kind of, if you have to go back to that lesson multiple times, but also in order to like reteach that, like being able to say like, okay, what's not working, So I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
Yes.
that definitely does make sense. And I think, yeah, when I think back to like the teachers that have like really resonated in my like education, they all kind of embody a lot of those characteristics. So I think, yeah, you definitely hit it on the head. Well, I think one thing to specifically to you that kind of makes your like journey a little bit more special is like you kind of mentioned it, that you have this like focus in special education, right? So I kind of wanted to like dig into that a little bit, like what made you want to pursue that, because that's a very like niche area of education. I think it's also
Yeah.
a very needed area of
Mm.
education. And what drew you to that, or maybe something pulled you there into that specific like subspecialty of education, but like why, what made you decide to pursue that route?
Yeah. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I fell into it. It
Mhm.
Mm.
was like when I went into teaching initially, I didn't think special education is where I wanted to go. So my initial certification is to do um, children ages from daycare, so 0 months to third grade.
Mm.
Um, and so when I did my student teaching, I just so happened the only requirement that I had was that I had to do 6 weeks in a preschool program and 6 weeks in a primary. So that means like kindergarten, first, second grade. It just so happened that the classroom that I did do it in for the preschool setting was a special education class.
Mhm.
Um, and even then, I thought, okay, when this is over, I don't know if I see myself doing special education. I enjoyed my time there. I learned so much. But even as I was leaving those 6 weeks and going into my second grade experience, and then even after that, I didn't think I'm going to do special ed. It's
Mhm.
land a job in a general education preschool classroom. And then as I kind of went through the process of like interviewing or applying, I realized I am certified to teach special education preschool. And so I took a shot and applied for the position that I'm currently in, and they took a chance on me.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a really crazy story because I work in the school that I did my student teaching in. And I think that's like probably the greatest blessing. I'm going off on a tangent here. But it's every teacher's dream to be able to get hired at the school that you do your teaching at, or your student teaching at, right? Because you learn those policies, procedures, you get comfortable with the demographics of the student body and even of the staff, and you just find your place and you feel comfortable. And so sometimes when you have to go outside of that and start completely new, it can be more intimidating. So I would say like it's really great when a student teacher can get a job at the place that they were student teaching in. I think it's every time I have mentioned that, everyone always just says, "Oh, that's so great. That's so great." And so I think it's been a really big blessing to be able to say that I student taught there and they hired me because they liked what I did. And, you know, they liked who I was as a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that one thing before we started recording, you brought up was like some of the challenges that you face as a teacher. And then there's a whole layer of challenges throughout the pandemic and now going back to in the classroom. I guess, could you start off? I mean, there's going to be 3 different phases I'm going to ask these questions for. Is like, so the challenges before, because you've been doing this for 10 years. So the challenges before the pandemic, the ones that how it translated into like during the pandemic, I'm guessing you were doing virtual, and now that you gotta like try to teach again back in the classroom, like, so how did that all go down, I guess?
Yeah, so I think to start with that first like phase of like challenges pre-pandemic, I want to say that it for me personally, it's the emphasis on high quality early childhood education. I think a lot of people think that what I do is babysitting, but it's not. Yes, I only have students for 2.5 hours a day, but in those 2.5 hours, I have to fit in literacy, math, social studies, social emotional, art, gross motor, music. So all of your content areas that you get as a kid, and trying to squeeze in into those 2.5 hours, all the while providing you with a fun experience so that you think schooling is fun and that foundation is laid out where you're excited to go to school.
Yeah.
I think that's probably that was my greatest challenge. And it still continues to be the biggest challenge, because I will still have colleagues that say like, "Oh yeah, it's just kind of like babysitting." And I'm like, "No, it's really not." And they find out what we do when they hear about like a cool program or something neat that we did, and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea that's what you guys do." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's just like school for us, you know?" So I would say like that's an ongoing discussion that I am more than happy to like show people that preschool is not just it's not daycare. And daycare is a whole different ballgame. Like not to discredit them, because I think what they do is so important. And they have kids from a lot longer than I do. They have them from 6 a.m. sometimes to 5 p.m. So, they have their own struggles as well. But when I think about my program and being in a school setting, it is completely different from that. So I would say that's probably been my biggest challenge, is shifting that mindset for people. That was pre-pandemic. But I think also like that was one of them. The other challenge, I think for me, is just like there's so many wide ranges of abilities and disabilities. And so being a new teacher, and again, like, right, I said, like, I kind of fell into SPED. I didn't really know much about like the different disabilities that I would come across. I knew like what would be best practice for them, but in terms of like the knowledge of really understanding it and how to address these things. And so that was probably the most challenging part, was making sure that I was meeting their needs. And that was probably scary. I think that was probably very stressful for me because I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing or not. And I could only tell based on the progress that they made. And so it was then actually, and then to go back to like that question of how did I fall into this? After about 5 years of teaching pre-K SPED, I actually went back to school for my master's and got the whole endorsement for being able to teach special education from pre-K to the age of 21.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And so that's how I kind of fell into that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those were the two challenges that I faced pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
During the pandemic was a different kind of, I mean, we're like talking way different here. I want to say, I lost so much sleep that year.
Oh man.
I think I really did. I would wake up like at 1 o'clock in the morning with anxiety, with like an anxiety attack, of just like, just like the health concerns of these kids. And we're talking like the 2020, 2021 school year. Mm-hmm. Oh no, I'm sorry, 21, 22 school year, right? Because we kind of, when everything hit, it was March of 2020. So we were all remote. And then August, we like decided we were going to go back in person. And as soon as I got the call for that, I think I cried. I cried for a good hour. Just with the anxiety of having to, and knowing like how serious it was at the time and how little we knew about it, was very nerve-wracking for me. I didn't think that I would be able, knowing what I knew about 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and especially the special education population of kids, and how they don't quite understand to keep your hands to yourself, to stay 6 feet away. That became a really big burden for me, or like not burden, but something that weighed heavily on me. How am I going to keep everyone healthy was my main concern. All the while making sure they were making their academic progress and functional progress that they needed to, in order to just continue to grow. So I would say that was probably the most difficult, was that was a constant reminder of like, or a constant thing that was in the back of my head. How can I keep these kids 6 feet apart? And and basically everything that I've taught the kids from that school year before, I had to undo, because of COVID protocols in that sense. And so I think a lot, I want to say I felt like being a new teacher again, because it was just the unknown. Wow. It was the unknown. A lot of teachers felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this, because it was so different from what we had grown accustomed to and being able to do. And our school was amazing at listening to teacher needs and family needs and things like that. And so they really worked with us to try and develop a schedule where it was, okay, we're going to be in person these days and remote on this day. And you can do small groups here and there, and spread out. But it was a lot. It was a lot to do, and it was a lot to plan. It was just exhausting. And we did class outside for like until October and November, where we were like in jackets, because we were just so concerned about just the spread of it all. And that was tough. That was tough. And I think that still continues to be a concern of mine, is how do I keep everyone healthy? And granted, like now that we know a little bit more about it, about COVID, and just, now parents kind of understand the risk of like, if you're sending your child to school, you're kind of taking, the risk of what could happen and what they could potentially bring home. I, of course, don't want to throw everything out the window and say like, oh, well, we're going to forget all the protocols and just function like a normal classroom. I still try to keep as much as we can. Like, well, we walk in, we sanitize a day. So just trying to keep things clean and keep everyone healthy. I think I will say like our health protocol has probably increased in that sense. Like if you have any kind of symptom, we're just going to ask you to stay home. Whereas before, I always used to say like, if it's a cough or they're sneezing and you think they can't do the 2.5 hours, keep them home. But if you think they can, then send them. But because everyone handles a cold differently, right? And so like I could probably go to work with a cold, but now if I do, it's like, well, no, I don't want to risk exposing anyone to that. So we've kind of had to change our stance in that sense. So, but I'm hoping things get better.
Definitely. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, David?
No, go ahead, man.
I was going to say, I mean, like, I love how you said it was like you're starting over as a teacher. It was like your first year as being a teacher. That's like the perfect example because there's so many new rules to this and how, and like, you kind of know that the foundation, but it's like you have to address it so differently. And then like maybe half the classes there, maybe they're not, maybe you have to go online and so much adjustment for the kids at this young of an age, man. And it was, what's crazy is like, you may feel like, okay, this is it feels like my first year being a teacher again, all these fears, but in front of these kids, I have to keep it together because they can't know that I'm worried or that I'm not sure, or they might freak out. I don't know, they're so young, but you have to keep it together. That's why it's like such a crazy balancing act. And I have so much respect for what you and all the teachers have done throughout these. I mean, of course, before the pandemic, but even more so throughout the pandemic and trying to bring it back. I mean, I can't even imagine like even dealing with some like the parents, you know what I mean? And what their opinions are on certain things, So it's, I mean, that's the only comment I wanted to make out of that. How about for you, David?
No, I was literally thinking the same thing. I was just like, how do you, like, that's a balance in itself. Like you were balancing things already pre everything closing down. And then I don't know, it's just like carrying so many different things so differently, I think was huge, right? Like you were already doing these things, but like now having to do it so differently was such a challenge. But I think, I don't know, like your approach to educating people about like what you do and in behind the scenes and or behind the curtain, in front of the curtain, right? And that's something that like you and I have also like kind of talked about in the past as well. And I think just your approach to helping people understand what it is that you do, right? Because sometimes there's just that misunderstanding or lack of understanding. And I think also the curtain of the pandemic made that even worse, So I think talking about like, what does that actually even look like? And so, I mean, this is something that I've always asked, like just personally about teachers in general, but I think specifically now, like what is the preparations like leading into school for this academic year? What does that look like for you, right? And like, how are you preparing for that? And also, I guess an added layer to that question is how are you preparing like yourself mentally, balance wise? How would you address that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because I think yesterday I ran into a student outside the school building. They came to drop off some forms, and he was so surprised to see us there. And he was like, "Wait a second, teachers have to work during the summer?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude." So he was really surprised to see us and to know that we were all the teachers were in the building. I want to say like it doesn't stop. Like, so I think the common misconception of like people think teachers have summers off is so just out wrong, it's just blatantly wrong. For myself personally, I didn't take the summer off. Like I taught summer school with my students until mid-July. And so I had 3 weeks to recharge, but all the while during those 3 weeks where everyone told me, disconnect from work, don't answer any work emails, I was answering work emails. Or I was connecting with parents. But I think like in my situation, it's so different, especially now because these are kids who were born during the pandemic.
Dang, that's true.
If you think about it, right? These are kids who were born during the pandemic and they don't know, they haven't known anything outside the four walls of their home. So like the social skills, the separation anxiety, it's tenfold right now.
Wow.
And so our job is to make this as enjoyable for them as it is for parents, right? Because no parent wants to know their kid cried for 2.5 hours. and said, I want mommy. When's mommy coming home? That's heartbreaking for them. It's heartbreaking for me. And so over the summer, I've had play dates with my students
Oh,
where
wow.
to kind of just help them get to know me, to
Mhm.
see our classroom environment. Um,
Wow, what?
so it like, so, right,
That's
you asked the
crazy.
question of like, what did I do to prepare for this school
Yeah.
year? Well, that preparation started in June.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
I
Wow.
had my first play date with my students in June to kind of say like, hey, this is going to be your teacher in a few months. It's so nice to meet you. This is our classroom. These are our toys. Come play. Um,
Wow.
and then all of the families, you know, they all get their letters of like, welcome to school. Here's your teacher, things like that. And then all the questions start flooding in from parents. And so it never really ended, like preparation wise, or like, I guess there was really no end
Yeah.
of the year to like beginning of the year type thing, because it all just kind of flowed into one. But I personally didn't mind the fact that like I had
Yeah.
to start preparing for this school year in June, because I know and I've seen how these types of things, like these, we call them transition days, how beneficial the transition days can really
Mm,
be.
yeah.
It just makes it able for us to hit the ground running on day one without anyone crying, without anyone being upset. Everyone's just so excited to come to school and get to be there for 2.5 hours then versus the 1 hour. And then they have to leave. So yeah, to answer that question, for preparation started in June. But
wow.
I think like that was like, yeah, the physical preparation, right?
Yeah.
Um, getting all of that stuff ready and also getting the classroom ready. Um, that for me started in August, early August. I was able to go in and kind of just move furniture around, and kind of make it so that my assistant could enjoy her summer and that they didn't have a lot of work to do when they came in. Just because I value everyone's time and I don't mind taking on that, not burden or but that task, um, because I enjoy what I do, you know, like
Yeah.
it's just when I'm in there, I get a sense of it's a sense of like, this is where I belong. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm just happy in there. So sometimes like those are the times where I'm like, okay, I do this. I don't mind that I had to work all summer long.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. I love hearing that kind of passion for what someone
Yeah.
does for a living. I mean, for you to have these play dates and just start early back in June so that these kids have a better transition and they just more comfortable with you. I mean, that's amazing to hear. And for those who are listening, who are thinking about teaching, like, could you see yourself doing that? And I really hope that you would if you do decide to pursue to become a teacher. Because I mean, this takes work, you know what I mean? But it also takes some passion and some love in what you do. But I mean, I also want to kind of talk about like you do all this preparation, you know, meet with these kids, you get your classroom ready. But I mean, if you were to ask parents like as they how they could help their teachers for their kids,
Mm,
you know, as this new school year is
Mhm.
starting, some of these kids have lived longer in this pandemic or were born in the pandemic more than not in the pandemic. So like how can they help
Yeah.
you guys and partner with you guys and prepare their kids so that they can be just, you know, like good partners in this whole process?
Yeah. And I love how you said partners. I'm just
Mhm.
going to throw that out there because that's what we are. We're partners in this, right? And that's something we reiterate or we like repeat from day one, is that we are a team. We're
Mhm.
a team in this. And so some of the things that I start to do is I'll like, sometimes it's just a follow through of like when I send an email and say like, hey, um, how is so and so doing? And I think it starts with me though, in terms of developing that relationship for them to do that follow through.
Mhm.
So once they see that like I'm invested and I'm truly, it's a genuine curiosity of like, hey, how are you? How are you doing? That reply back alone tells me that there's follow through going on at home. And so
Mhm.
once that connection is established, I am able to then say like, hey, we're starting the new school year. Here are some things that you can do to get your child ready. Start driving by the school, letting them know like this is where you're going to be going, so
yeah.
that they're used to seeing the building. Take them to the playground at school and say this is where you're going to play, things like
Mhm.
that. And so, and then asking them, like, if you have any questions, please reach out to me at any time. I will answer it. Because it's, I need to know what's on their mind, and they know what I communicate with them, what's going on at school. So it's a two-way street in that sense. And so if there really is a question or a concern, trying to establish that so that we can help each other in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah. I like so many of these things. I feel like you just shed a lot of light on the process. You shed a lot of light on like what actually goes on, and the time it actually takes, and the investment that it really is, just the investment. And I mean, I kind of wanted to talk about that, like, because a lot of our listeners too, like, maybe have thought about teaching, or maybe have thought about pursuing something in education. And, having this kind of like deep dive, or like this transparent, like, conversation about like what it actually takes and what you've actually gone through, I think is very just enlightening. But if for someone that wants to do that, right? And I know there are a lot of things that you couldn't have predicted throughout the course of your tenure as a teacher, but like, what advice would you give to somebody that's even considering, but also like, you know, that wants to do this but doesn't know that they can do it now, given the new circumstances that you operate under, and just the changes, because now education is just in such a fluid state. What is your advice for people that are thinking about that?
I would say if you're thinking about it, I think you got to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think for myself personally, and I think I want to say this for a few of the friends that I have that are teachers, they know, every single one of them have said, like, I've known from a young age that I've wanted to work with kids. And I think that's a common theme amongst educators, is that, like, if you're going to do this, know that this is what you really want to do. And you're not doing it for the pay or anything like that. You're doing it because you love kids. Because we often hear, right, like, teachers don't get paid enough. And then they end up leaving the profession because not only are they not getting paid enough, they're also spending their own money on resources for their classroom. And so I think, like, if you really think about it, you're not doing it for that. You're doing it because you want to make an impact on a child's life.
Yeah.
And make sure that they have someone to connect with throughout their time with you that year. Because you could be the one thing that could change the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure both of you, like, if I were to ask you, like, think back to your education, can you pinpoint one teacher that, like, really made an impact that you still remember to this day?
Dude. Oh yeah.
Easily.
Oh yeah.
Easily.
Yeah,
shout out
right?
shout out Miss Padilla, my PE teacher back in elementary school. I mean, like, all the other teachers, man. And that's why, like, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but like, you talk about pay, but it's like, you guys deserve so much more, because I mean what you've just explained, as far as you're building the foundation for these children, man, not just the education, but like, it's like social things, like everything that you should learn from just like real life situations until you're an adult is what you learn in school, man. You know what I mean? I know, like I said, I'm preaching to the choir here because I know exactly all the important stuff that you do and what you guys deserve. That's all I'm going to say. But I do. I mean, like, you talked about the challenges that, you face as a teacher. You talk about, you gave advice like David had asked. I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us about the rewarding factors for those who are on the fence, if they should pursue teaching, or like, I think I want to be a teacher. I like kids, like, I think I have these skills, I like this advice, but like, what are the rewarding moments, and what keeps you going? I mean, 10 years strong. So
it's funny that you said, like, 10 years strong. There's a 5-year burnout rate for special education teachers.
Wow.
There's a 5-year burnout rate. And so I have surpassed that. And it's, for me, is I don't see myself, like, leaving the classroom anytime soon. And so I think the most rewarding thing for me is just seeing the progress the kids make. I can tell you, like, if you give me all my kids in a list, I can tell you what they look like in the beginning of the year and what they look like at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is like so exciting to share with parents, especially my kids who are with special needs, because that they're starting at a disadvantage already. And we want to catch them up. Like, right. That's what I tell every parent. We want them to be where they should be. And so that, I think, is the most rewarding, is like working with, I love seeing the growth that my gen ed kids make, but it's my special ed kids that I really like just kind of keep me going, despite how physically and mentally exhausting a day can be. Like my ears go home ringing because they were loud, or they were crying for 2.5 hours, or someone pulled my hair, or, you know, someone bit me. Like that's my daily, like that's the daily thing, or like a weekly occurrence. Or we had dirty diapers all 2.5 hours long, you know, like that's my day. But once we start getting that kid potty trained, holy cow, like that's amazing. Look at what we did as a team. Once I get kids who start being who start out being nonverbal, or they're using like a communication device to talk to me, so an iPad, and then all of a sudden at the end of the year, we're using 2 to 3 word phrases and saying, I want goldfish, you know? And so that's like, the growth that they make in that time can honestly bring me to tears with how much like I'm giving a parent in that sense. Like parents have cried and said, you've given us so much in that sense. And I tell them, I go, you have no idea what your child has done for me, because that alone is just like so amazing. Kids are resilient. They're resilient.
Yes.
They are amazing. So
Dude, that's like, and I just want and I have to hit on this again, but like just the passion with which you speak about your profession. It's like, it's infectious. Honestly, that's probably like the best way that I can describe it. It's infectious, and it just like makes, like, you know, I'm not a teacher, but like I feel that, and I just like it's just like, it's like, damn, like that's so good. It just feels so good, you know, to know that, like, you know, that just, you have that. And like, it's like we always say this to like people. It's like, just find it, you know, because and it's like, I don't know what it looks like. That's what it looks like. You know, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And you talk about, and I love that you talk about just like, you know, being able to see like your students' goals, hit goals, you know, but like what are your goals? Like what's like, you know, what is it for you, right? Like you've walked this 10-year road, you know, and then like, you know, like you said, you're not going to be leaving the classroom anytime soon, which I 100% agree with. You know, you should not be leaving the classroom anytime soon. But like, what does that look like another 10 years down that road? You know, like for you, like what are the things that you want to hit?
So remember how I said, like, I love the learning process. I've always contemplated like going back to school for more. What can I do more? So, and it's, I think at the end of the year, actually, my administrators asked us that question, like, what's your goal for next year? Currently, we're in the process of like kind of restructuring how we do things in the building in terms of collaborations with our team members or grade level teams. And so it's, we're implementing like this professional learning community type of environment where we're really collaborating with each other on how to teach, what to do when a student has mastered a skill and beyond. And so for me professionally, like right now, it's to gain a better understanding of that process, and how to apply that process then to make my kids make the progress that they need to do. Right? Because we have every kid that goes on to kindergarten, we want them to have a solid foundation in letters or numbers or colors and shapes so that they can hit the ground running and they don't have to go back to those pre-readiness skills. So that's one goal. Another goal is to just continue to learn more about my kids who have special needs. You know, I've seen kind of like a shift that I'm starting to see more kids on the autism spectrum where it's becoming more prevalent. And so I want to know more about it. Like, I just want to know more about what it is that it takes to get them to where they need to be. So what if that's strategies or curriculum, how to best address that. So looking to more training in that sense for that specific demographic.
Nice.
It's awesome. Well, I think after talking to you, I'm glad that we have teachers like you who are
Yes,
taking care of our kids.
Seriously.
You know what I mean? I don't have kids yet, but like I know that the kids of this country, you know what I mean? Like in the future, this country is in good hands with teachers like you. And obviously we want to give you the opportunity if anybody wants to learn more, if anybody wants to follow the same path or considering becoming a teacher, if they want to reach out to you, if you want to share maybe a way to get connected with you.
Yeah, sure. If you ever have any questions, reach out via email. David and Chris, I think I can share my email with you and then
Sure.
forward it to anyone that asks.
Yeah, perfect.